Lane, may I ask you, does it show that it's recording?
Say that again.
Show that it's recording.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, well, welcome. Thank you all for coming. If you could all mute yourself, I'd much appreciate it. Thank you.
There's, Karyn, there's echoes.
I know. Is it my echo? Or...
Mute everybody.
When you talk, it echoes.
Okay, this is not working. Okay. Why? I'm not even.
Okay, then maybe you have a phone and a computer together. Do you have your phone?
Okay, what is happening? It is still echoing, right? Am I able to?
No, that didn't echo. That didn't echo. Oh, but I
wish I knew the screen. I wish I knew how to mute everybody, but I don't know how to do that. Okay, is everyone muted? This owner is not muted. Could that be the problem? And Rachel's iPhone is not muted? Okay, I'm hoping this recording can be started at a later point. Okay, let's try again with the share screen and see what happens.
Analysts say during the market was brought to a near halt last March in the early days of the
Hi, Gail. If you without muted, could you mute? Thank you.
average price of a single family home is up by 21%.
That wasn't you. Somebody else's average pricing of the single family home. Okay, are we good now? Let's hope we're good. Okay, so let's begin, please. Thank you all for coming. The title of today's class is Zenith or Nadir. I never pronounce that. I always think of it as a Hebrew word called Nadir, but it's Nadir. David's Batsheva imbroglio, part 1, the conquest. So we're going to deal with each of those terms in a moment, but I'd like to start by saying, okay, I'd like to start by moving my screen by saying thank you very much, both to BAYT and Rabbi Karyn for allowing me to share learning with you today, and to Elaine. And you're going to ask yourself, why is there a picture of an iceberg? So I think you'll all understand that both Elaine and Rabbi Karyn, what they do for us, we see as the tip of the iceberg, but we all know that underneath the water, there's a whole bunch of other things that are done for us that we don't see, and we are very grateful. On behalf of everyone, when we say thank you very much to both of them for doing all this. Sorry, can somebody please? Much appreciated, thank you. Okay, so moving on, let's start by defining our terms. Zenith or nadir, that would be, zenith is the highest point and nadir is the lowest point. So I believe that throughout the 4 classes that we're going to have, and again, each one stands alone, so if you can't make it to all, hopefully we are recording, I believe. And you can look at it, look at the one that you miss afterwards. And at the end, I'd like to suggest that maybe if, with Elaine's permission, we will have another 10, 15, 20 minutes at the end of the 4th one where we can sit and discuss whether we think that this was the highest point of David's career or whether it was the lowest point. Hopefully we're going to gather information throughout all of these 4 sessions, and we will make that decision at the end. Or we'll make it along the way as well, because I have obviously ideas about it, but you're welcome to have differing opinions, and I'm okay with that. And as with everything in the Tanakh, not everything, but most things, there are going to be mefarshim that fall out on one side and mefarshim that fall out on another side. But the idea is, as with all of our avot, we are sure that they're great people, but some mefarshim say like, no, they were almost perfect. And some people say, well, no, they had their faults. And that's the reason why there are avot, because we can learn from them, not just the 3 forefathers, but all of the great men and women of our history. So therefore, I'm of the opinion of the second, whereas they were not perfect, and we can learn from them, and that's why they're there. Because if they were perfect, what they have to teach us would be unaspirable. We could not aspire to reach their level. But now we can aspire. We might never reach it, but we're aspiring. Okay, the next part was question? No, okay. David's Batsheva imbroglio. And somebody asked me before, what is an imbroglio? So of course I have to tell you. And that is from the Cambridge Dictionary, an unwanted, difficult, and confusing situation full of trouble and problems. So we'll see that how that is going to be true of the situation we're learning about. Okay. And the final part is part 1, the conquest. So in each of my 4 parts, the title relates not just to one aspect of the story, but to a number of aspects, and we'll see that as we go through. Let me just catch up. Okay, starting with our first pasuk here, we find a number of things. So let's read it through. Vayhi li'tshuvat hashana. It was at the return of the year, and we'll see what that means in a minute. Le'etzet hamalachim, at the time when kings go out. V'yishlach David et Yoav ve'et avadav. And David, the King David, sent Yoav, his general, and his servants, i.e. the servants either of Yoav or the servants of David, ve'et kol Yisrael, and all of Israel. V'yashchitu et bnei Ammon, and they destroyed the sons of Ammon, the country of Ammon, v'yatzuru al Rabbah, and they laid siege to Rabbah, which was their main city. Okay, so if we look at that, we see a number of things. We see the highlighted portions, right? It talks about all of the active verbs that was happening. And we know from the way Tanakh works, they use the vav hahipuch, right? There's a future tense word, and then they put a vav in front of it, and that changes it to a past tense word. So all of these things were happening. And when it has these number of verbs in sequence, we know that they happened one after another. Okay, so we're looking now at the grammar. And again, in Tanakh, every word is important. And the Mefarshim actually do this, but they don't sort of describe why they're doing it to you. But we're going to look at the Malbim in a minute, and we're going to see how he analyzes this pasuk, and he's going to actually talk about how he's doing it. So we see that each of these verbs, they're happening in sequence, and it's obviously a very active, very warlike discussion of what's happening, right? Everything's about the battle. But then all of a sudden, we see this, and it's from the same pasuk. V'David yoshev b'Yerushalayim, and King David obviously was sitting in Jerusalem. So that's very much of a sort of a bomba idea. It all of a sudden comes up and says, okay, here I am. You would think that David is supposed to be the king going out with them, correct? But no, he's sitting in Yerushalayim. And not only do we see that from the words themselves, but the tense of the way the way the sentence is structured, Yoshev is not the same kind of vav hayipuch with the future tense as all the others. It also means that he was sitting there for a long time. It wasn't just he left and went to sit in Jerusalem. No, because that would be structured differently. It says he was sitting there the whole time. He wasn't out with them at all. Okay, let's go. And one more thing, I didn't ask you, but there's a word here, malachim. Does anyone want to pipe up quickly and tell me what's wrong with that word? If you do, you have to unmute yourself. Is that somebody speaking?
Yeah, it's there's an aleph there, which would ordinarily mean messengers, most likely.
Correct. Thank you very much. So we're asking ourselves, why is there, and it doesn't seem to be a Kriyan K'tiv. It seems to be that is the word there. So we're asking ourselves, why would we put the word, not use it correctly and put without the aleph, malachim, like kings, and sending messengers? So we're going to see that might be a theme coming up as well. It's a hint to that. Okay, so now we're going to look at the Malbim, and he's going to talk about this pasuk. And I'm really sorry it's not in Hebrew, but we'll go through it and translate it. If you look at the reddish tone, he says, wherever it says that reddish tone, you might think that, and then it says Amar, and then the bolded words are all the words that come from the pasuk themselves. So let's go through it. Yermoz she'al yedei sheyashav hamelech b'veito v'lo halach be'atzmo lilchom milchamat Hashem. So you would think, it would be hinted at that since David was sitting in his house and did not go out to fight the war, that he should have been fighting the war of Hashem. The situation, the imbroglio that came about because of this, right? He wasn't doing what he was supposed to do. He was utilizing his malachim instead of being the melech that he was supposed to be. And therefore, this is what happened. Leval tomar sheya yageh verapeh yadayim milchama, rapeh yadayim mimilchama hakodemet, amar shehaya li'tshuvat hashana. So lest you think that this was because he was tired and he was recuperating from a previous battle, it says li'tshuvat hashana. So this was a new season, a new time. So he would have already had time to rest up from any previous battles. ולבל תחשוב שלא היה עת ראוי לצאת מפני הקור והגשם, unless you think that it wasn't a good time to go out because it was too cold or it was too rainy. אמר לעת צאת המלאכים. It was, and here they don't put the aleph. It says because it was the time of kings going out. So this was a perfect time to do that. כי היה בחודש סיוון, because it was in Sivan, so even later than we are now. שכל מלאכי הארץ יוצאים מפניהם בקרב. So everybody was like, their intentions, their thoughts were towards war at this time to go out. ולבל תאמר שהייתה מלחמה קטנה, and don't, lest you think it was a small war, שאין כבוד המלך לצאת בה, but small, lest you think it wasn't honorable enough for the king to go out by himself. אמר כי שלח את יואב שר הצבא ואת עבדיו. So he sent his biggest general and all of his servants, שהם כל שרי החיל והגיבורים, so that everybody that was an important warrior, ואת כל ישראל, and all of Israel. I mean, obviously you don't mean all of Israel, but at least the warriors. ובזה היה ראוי שילך מלכם לפניהם. So therefore it was fitting that the king should come before them, but obviously he didn't. והם השחיתו את בני עמון ויצאו על רבה, שזה נמשך זמן רב, ובכל זאת, okay, so it says that they destroyed Ammon and they laid siege upon it. Laid siege upon Rabbah, the capital city. So therefore it means that it was going on for a long time. So it seems that he didn't even go out to visit them at all. Okay, so therefore it says, b'chol zot, despite this, v'David yoshev b'Yerushalayim. David was sitting in Jerusalem, v'lo ba le'ezrat Hashem b'giburim. He didn't go out with his army, and he was just a man of leisure, it seemed, such that instead of being the melech, as I said, he was sending malachim, as you will see in a moment. So you see how every word in the Tanakh is important, and the Malbim here brings the idea that each word comes to tell us something about what was happening, and in doing so, each word is an indictment of David. Okay, not each word, each sentence, each phrase. So we see that David isn't looking so good right now, right? And even the first pasuk says that because he wasn't doing what he was supposed to do, therefore this incident came upon him. Okay. So now we're going to look at these two, and I'm going to ask you that as I read them through, if you could think about a few things. Think about your opinions of David. Think about your opinions of Batsheva. And if you could all mute yourself again, please, that would be good. I just heard some wrestling. And as you do that, also think about this idea. Did Batsheva exhibit any agency? Was there any part of these happenings that she was able to act upon her own? She had independence to act in, or she was always just acted upon? So let's see what you say. And I'm going to ask you at the end. So as I'm reading, please be thinking about that. And hopefully somebody's going to answer. Okay. Vehi la'et erev. It was at evening time. Ve'yakam David me'al mishkavo. And David, I'm sorry, if you could mute, thank you. And if David got up from his couch, his bed, V'yitalech al gag beit hamelech, and he was strolling around the roof of the basically the castle, right? Vayar isha rochetzet, and there was a woman who was bathing me'al hagag, on top of the roof. V'isha tovat mareh me'od, she was very, very beautiful. Yishlach David v'yidrosh le'isha. I'm sorry, I don't know how to mute everybody, so if you could, that would be great. Yishlach David v'yidrosh le'isha, so he sent obviously messengers. He inquired after the woman. Vayomer, hello, anyone? Is this not Batsheva, Bat Eliam, the daughter of Eliam, Eshet Uriah Hittite, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? V'yishlach David malachim, and he sent messengers again. V'yikacheha, and he took her. V'tavo elav, and she came to him. V'yishkav ima, and they had relations with each other. V'hi mitkadeshet mitumata, and she was purified from her nida, basically. V'tashav el beta, and she returned to her house. V'tahara isha, the woman became pregnant. V'tishlach v'taged David, and she sent word, and she told David, v'tomar, and she said, hara anochi, I am with child, I am pregnant. Okay, so now having read that through, either on your own or with me, I'd like some feedback, please. What do you think of all of the people involved? I'm sorry, could we mute again? If you have something to say, please, or if Elaine sees something in the chat, I'd love to hear about it. Anybody? Oh, you know what?
Hi.
Yes, go ahead. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. Okay.
I think that from the language, the English translation at least, it does not look like she was taken. He took her.
Okay, so you're focusing on the word taken, vayikach. Okay, we're going to get to that. Excellent, excellent observation. Does anyone have anything else, or do you have more, Rachel? Does anyone have any reason to support Rachel's assertion or any evidence to say that she did have some agency?
Karen, it's
Yes,
Aviva. No,
Aviva.
I'm just thinking that, at the beginning it says she was bathing, in the roof. What was she doing such a public,
Right,
it
so
doesn't sound right.
okay, so you're saying that she was on top of the roof outside.
I'm not blaming her for any of that. I'm just saying that's not a behavior. That's a behavior maybe
Hi,
conducive
Linda.
Right.
something private.
I'm just listening to a
public.
Shiur, but they can't hear me, so I'm good.
I can't hear you.
Oh, okay, all good. Thank God.
Okay.
Yeah, what about you? Did you have a good Pesach?
The person who's talking about Pesach.
Karen, you should be able to mute everyone. Ask Elaine how to do it. You should be able to mute it.
On the balcony, and I'm leaving there for my sons to come and schlep downstairs. It's too much, the schlep, No, I mean, 3:30 yesterday said, don't do anything that will hurt you. So I said, well, pretty much we're done.
And that you're not muted.
So they're just smaller, like, clean bags, and in a box on the bed, took boxes to the balcony.
Can you address that person and just
We put it in a big baggie and put it inside yesterday. And
call
unpacked,
her.
and in the
really don't.
morning, she'll tell us her yoga. and what-
Karen, there is a way to mute and you should know how. And if you can't, you
Look, I don't have little kids, so there was no rush.
Okay, I found the person and I muted her. Okay, yay. I'm sorry, I just have to do it one at a time because I don't see a mute all. And please forgive me, everybody, for this. I'm not proficient at Zoom. Okay, back to us. So Rachel has told us that v'kacheha, she says that she was acted upon. And Aviva has said that she was bathing on the roof. Is there any other evidence for or against her being an agent in this event? Okay, so let's keep that in mind and we will move on. First, here we are, we've already moved on apparently. We're going to look at a few things. Number one, if you look at the blue, she is Ha'isha. She's not a person. She seems, and again, the text uses a specific word. He could have said Batsheva again and again and again, but they chose to use Ha'isha, maybe indicating, it's not for sure, that David looked at her as a woman to, for that will be useful for his purposes. We look also at Malachim at the beginning and Malachim later on in Pasuk Daled, where again, he's supposed to be a king, but yet he's sending messengers. And again, that will be a theme throughout these 4 sessions. Vayishlach, he's also doing a lot of sending, right? He's just sending and sending and sending. This is seems to be what he thinks his task is at this point. We look at the words bait in purple and mishkavo, they seem to go together. So at the beginning, he was lying on his bed, he gets off his bed, he's in his house, and in Pasuk Daled, he takes her and has relations with her, and she returns to her house. So that's also a little bit of a literary theme. Okay, those are very sort of just interesting points, but now we're going to get deeper into the ideas that Aviva and Rachel started to talk about. So this is Aviva's point. Vayar isha rochetzet me'al hagag. So Aviva has said, well, the me'al hagag, which is bolded and highlighted here in yellow, she seems to think that, and many Mefarshim do think that she herself was on top of the roof. So let's look at this in picture form. And of course, this is not a picture of David's castle, but I think we get somewhat of the idea here. Please, Elaine, raise your hand if you can see my cursor. Can you see my cursor as it moves? Yes or no? Yes, you can. Okay, great. So if this were David, the castle is obviously going to be the tallest building in the area. This looks like Mediterranean, but it is definitely not Israel. But David would be looking from our vantage point, and he might see right over here this little patio, and she might have been on there, or she might have been in here. Some Mefarshim do say that he was the one that was Me'al Hagag, right? Because it said before that he was V'talech al Hagag, that he was taking a little walk on his roof. So he might have seen in a window, maybe this window over here. right? He made, or one of these windows, right? She might have had it open and not realized it, and she might be completely innocent, and it just might be that he saw her, but it might have been that she was on the roof. And if she was on the roof, as Aviva intimated, maybe she did have some agency. Maybe she said, my husband has gone off to war, which we'll talk about in a minute, and I'm going to get the king to really notice me. And since I'm beautiful, then maybe I can do that. Okay, so let's move on. Now we're going to move on to Halozot Batsheva, right? So he sent for her, and he sent messengers to ask about her. And he said, is this not Batsheva? So now the question is, we look here and we see the flow of the psukim. He asked about the woman, but he didn't ask anything specific, right? He didn't speak words at that point. He just said, go find out about her. But we're not really sure whether they did go find out and came back with a report, or whether the Vayomer right here, he said, was a reference to him just hypothesizing, because the word halo indicates that maybe that might be. He might have said, isn't that Batsheva? And isn't she the wife of Uriah? And so if that's the case, either way, it doesn't really matter if he did get a report that she was Batsheva, or that he was just hypothesizing, because either way, he knew that her name was Batsheva, and most importantly, he knew that she was Eshet Uriah, that she was the wife of Uriah. So in that case, yet he continued to act. Okay, so again, at the beginning, I asked you what your thoughts are about David and how culpable he was for this situation, and what it was all about. So here we go. So I'm bringing again the Malbim, and I'm going to read it outside because it's just far too many words. But basically, if we look at it this way, I just want to make sure I cover everything. Okay, if we look at it this way, the first idea in the yellow, orange, whatever, is that in the time of David made all of his army create a get for their wives before they went to war. This is what's asserted here. So why do they do that? Because in war, two things can happen. You can either be taken captive, and if you're taken captive, then you've created a situation of an aguna, because you don't know if the person is ever coming back. And obviously we don't want the person to come back 10 years later, she's remarried, and now there's mamzerim involved. Like children have been born, and it's a bad situation for those children. That's number one. So therefore, if you give a get, and it's not just a get, it's a retroactive get, so that therefore, if you don't come back, you were divorced as of the time that you left, the husband left. So that's one possibility. And the second possibility is obviously that you're killed, but he describes here, the Malbim, that when you're killed, you bury the dead people quickly, and not the person burying them does not necessarily recognize that person, and is not able then to go back to the wife and tell her that, hey, I saw your husband and he's dead and I buried him, right? Because it's thousands of people, and therefore you're anonymous. Okay, so then if you look here at this idea, get gamor, like a complete get, or get al tanai, a conditional get. If they don't come back, then it was retroactive. Okay, so the assertion by the Malbim is that David did send messengers to ask about her, and he came, and they found out that yes, that was Batsheva, and yes, she was panuya, that she was free because the husband gave her a get. So therefore, he might have felt that, okay, so she's free. I can do what I want because she's not a married woman anymore, right? And then, and if she was free, then there was no problem. But if there was a get al tanai, then therefore he had to make sure that Uriah did not come back, right? And so therefore he would give him some shlichut that would cause him to be dead, which is eventually what did happen. But there's a little intervening part 2 next week that we'll talk about. Okay, and then the Malbim finally mentions this idea that he mikadeshet mitumata. Not only was David not culpable for having adultery, but also he found out that he sent these messengers to find out that she was not in nida. So therefore, if she's not in nida, excellent, that's another problem that's overcome. So let's see what else happens. So I'm just recapping for you. There are 3 possible situations. Either she was fully divorced, either she was contingency divorced, where if Uriah does not return, then what happens? Or she was still married to Uriah and there was no get. If she was fully divorced, then doesn't seem to be a problem, right? She can become his wife, right, whether she's pregnant or not. But it says she went home. So then we always say, like, but Batsheva and David, wow, what a love story. I mean, I have other ideas about who was his true love, who was his zivug, but the Batsheva if he really, really loved her, and it seems she wasn't divorced, why didn't he keep her there? Like he could have, right? I mean, think of, obviously he's not a Jewish king, but Achashverosh and Esther. And it says Eshet Uriah. So the Tanakh seems to want to tell us, well, maybe it wasn't so kosher. Okay, that's number one. Number two, if she was still married to Uriah and she was not pregnant, then he sent her home, right? She went home, and there would still be the idea of adultery. He would still have been an adulterer, and that would be a sin. But if she was pregnant, the problem then would be they're both adulterers, not just him, and she would be stoned because that's the result of being an adulterer. And of course, because David is king and nobody knew it was him, ha ha ha, and therefore he would, like it is today, right? Really powerful, don't get punished, right? So he would not be identified, and therefore he would not necessarily be stoned. So I don't think he was so worried about himself. And of course, the final case, if there was a contingency divorce, then if there was no pregnancy, he would still have to deal with his sin of adultery. But if there was a pregnancy, it would be not a problem. That no problem goes ... to the if Uriah comes back, has relations, and thinks the child is his. Now, if that's the case, then it would still be a sin for David, right? Because he still had the relations. But if Uriah is killed in battle, then retroactively, he would not have been married to Batsheva, and therefore there was also no sin of adultery, and also everything was kosher. So I hope that clarifies it with this little slide here. Okay, so now we move on to the third thing. We had the idea of Me'al Hagag, who was on the roof, and was it her or him or both? We had the idea of Halo Batsheva, and was she married or not? Now we have this last pasuk, there's not second to last pasuk, that he took her, and then getting back to Rachel's idea of Veikach, but there's actually a second one of like Veishkav ima. Was it actual rape, or did he just lay with her and it was okay, or was it mutual? So we're going to see some evidence for different points.
I want to tell you something in the chat that I forgot to tell you. Batsheva is openly bathing on the roof. She seems to know what she's doing, being enticing.
Okay, that is some or somebody's asserting that here. I'm sorry, is somebody bringing a mafarish who says that, or is that an assertion by one of the people in the audience?
No, it's it's my comment. It's my comment. Yeah.
Right. And that is a legitimate thing, that she was Me'al Hagag, she herself, but there is a counter opinion that he was Me'al Hagag, because it says so earlier that he was walking on the thing, and she was very tsanua. She was in her room and she didn't realize that the window was open. So there's two, and I think the text is meant to be ambiguous. You're meant to have that tension and say, it could be this and it could be that. And let's see, like if that was the only piece of evidence, then I would say, okay, she's tsanua. But maybe there's other evidence as well, which hopefully we're going to come to by the end.
Karyn, can I mention something?
Absolutely.
Okay, because it says here that David sent messengers and took her, and then it says, and she came in unto him.
Oh.
So that sounds very voluntary. Like she didn't resist, she wasn't dragged in.
Okay, excellent point. And we are going to get there, and I truly appreciate that you jumped the gun, because you're smart and you get these things. So, okay, so here we go. So that Elaine is 100% correct. It says V'tavo elav, that she came to him, and we're going to see that in a moment. So very good. Okay, so V'yishkav ima, right? How did that go? Was it him taking her and she had no agency, or was she a willing participant, as they would say? But before we get to those two ideas, I'm going to go talk for 1 minute more. Malbim raised it, V'himit kadeshet mitumata. So in that, if you look here, I've just reorganized the pasuk. Vayishlach David, again, this vayishlach, vayikach, v'tavo, all of these are active verbs. And then all of a sudden we see v'himit kadeshet mitumata, right? So again, just like in this case at the very beginning, there's the avav haripuch, there's all of these active things going on. And it says that she was, this was an ongoing state, like David's ongoing state of sitting in Jerusalem. So this had been, obviously she wasn't becoming not Anita. She wasn't going to the mikvah at this point after he laid with her. This was happening way before, right? When it says he rochetzet, that was the time where the text should have said v'himit kadeshet, right? She rochetzet, she's washing, she's bathing. It's in order to become not Anita, to go to the mikvah. But they put it here. And why did they put it here? For the same reason, again, this is like literary analysis of the Tanakh, for the same reason that they said, David Yoshev Yerushalayim, because they want you to stop. They want you to go, hold on, this doesn't belong here, this belongs somewhere else. So this is a really important point, right? That this is the crux of it all. Like, because if she was already pregnant, then Uriah would never know, right? But since she wasn't pregnant and she could have the potential to become pregnant from David, oy vavoy, this is right after he sleeps with her, that's where it's going to become a problem. Okay, so that's why the text does it in this way. So now we're going to go back to the two problems. V'ikacheha, did he took her? No, did he take her forcibly? V'ishkavima, and did he sleep with her forcibly, i.e. rape, or was it she a willing participant? So let's look at both of these ideas. So first, v'ikacheha, it was Rachel who said that she was taken forcibly. I can't see all of you, but if you want to just raise your hands who thinks she's taken forcibly, and that is an idea that she did not have agency and she was not part of this. Anyone want to, I can't see that you're raising your hand. So, okay, but in your mind, raise your hand. And therefore, if you think that she's the one, that she has no agency and she was taken forcibly, I'm going to try to dispel that idea with this. In the Tanakh, the word vayikach is often used for taking a marriage partner. And here are three examples from the stories of the Tanakh. So vayelech ish mi beit Levi, v'ikach et bat Levi. So a man from the house of Levi took, obviously, this is Yocheved, Amram and Yocheved, and he took her. So obviously in this case, it doesn't mean he raped her. So therefore we're going to dispel that. Also, Yitzchak, after Sarah's death, he takes v'ikach et Rivka v'tehi lo leisha. He took her and she became his wife. That is obviously a very beautiful and not violent taking. And finally, v'ikach Boaz et Ruth, and same terminology, v'tehi lo leisha, and she became his wife. There you go, his wife. Okay, so all of those three come from stories, but unless you think it's just the stories, we also have this from the law aspect of the Tanakh, right? And this is the way it's formulated, ki kach ish isha, and this is the case where he takes a wife, and she is not found pleasing in his eyes, and therefore he can divorce her. Okay, so then we have dispelled the idea, although Rachel, it was a good idea, that vayikach means that he took her forcibly. Okay, moving on.
I'm happy to be proven wrong. I'm very happy. I'm quite relieved, actually.
I won't say you're wrong, because there is another case, and we might get to it, yeah, there it is, right here. This case where you can be taken and it can be forcible, as we'll see in 1 second. So we're moving on now to the idea of v'yishkav ima. So we're going to give you two examples over here and two examples on this side of different terminology for people laying with each other, people having relations with each other. So the first one is Dinah and Shem. And you see that Dinah, right, is the daughter of Yaakov. And she went out and she wanted to look upon the daughters of Shem, and Shem, the city. And she went there and she was taken by, actually the name of Shem, right? Ben Hamor, the Hamor was the head of the, as it were, and his son Shem, and he took her, he saw her, v'kachota. So in this case, it is a violent taking. It is a taking against her will. And then it says vayishkav ota, right? So the word ota as opposed to ima, and she was taken, and she was forcibly had relations with. And then Tamar and Amnon. So Tamar, just briefly, Tamar and Amnon were both half siblings, son and daughter of David from different mothers. And Amnon had a thing for Tamar, and he and his friend, I believe it's Yehonadav, they concocted a plan that he was going to pretend to be sick and she was going to minister to him. And in doing so, he would then take her. And that's exactly what happened, right? V'yishkav ota. So he took her forcibly. In case you weren't clear on that, the text gives you another note to make sure you understand, v'ya'aneha, that he oppressed her. And that's the same terminology used in Mitzrayim for the Jews in Mitzrayim. So it was not of her own free will. Okay, in contrast, we have, and I'll fill in this middle box, which is our box of what happened here in a moment. And we see there's Leah and Yaakov. And later on in our story, we have Batsheva and David again. After the son that she became pregnant with dies, V'yinachem David, and David comforted her from that death. and ve'avo elea ve'yishkav ima, and he laid with her because he was comforting her, and it was obviously a very lovely thing for him to do. And similarly, Leah and Yaakov, the story of the Dudaim, she exchanged her sons Dudaim with Rachel in order for a night with her husband, and it says there ve'yishkav ima. But interestingly, also there, it says this idea, ve'yavo eleha and elai tavo. So this concept of coming to me, like approaching me, right? I don't know, making the first move, that I'm not as bold enough to say that. But nevertheless, this idea of the approach maybe is a gentle approach. It's not oppression, obviously, it's just something quite nice. So I'm going to put up for a moment our Batsheva and David in our instance, and you're going to tell me which one it is. And I'm sorry for non-English speakers, non-Hebrew speakers. It's just too unwieldy to have both in such a chart. But anyone want to say it? Okay. Vayishkav ima, right. So it's obviously the second two. It's a more gentle, it's a more kind, having relations with each other. And also v'tavo elav, like as Elaine pointed out before. But in this case, interestingly, right, she comes to him. In both of these cases, Leah and Batsheva the second time, he comes to her. So v'tavo elav, that also indicates agency, correct? That she, as Elaine correctly said, she is possibly the initiator, which lends credence to the fact that she was on the roof, hoping that he would notice her. Okay, and again, please understand, this is I'm taking my proofs from the text, but yet there are Mefarshim who absolutely disagree with me. And again, I could give both equally, but I don't want to, frankly. So, okay. Now we have the final pasuk where she does become pregnant, and then after the tahar ha'isha, so she becomes pregnant, and then these words happen: "V'tishlach v'taged leDavid v'tomar hara anochi." So she sends, she speaks, she says, she tells, and again, I just heard a shiur last night that said v'taged. When you say taged is different, v'tomar, but taged means, and thank you, Rabbi Whitty, taged, and maybe other people too, taged means something that you did not know before. This is news to you. It's not just saying something like, that's not important, but taged is a piece of information, a news item that you need to know. Okay, so not only did she give him this news item, but she also said, hara anochi, I am pregnant. So then we look at that and we say, remember before we had David, sorry, your question? Okay, hopefully that person will mute themselves. Okay, I can't find who you are. Okay, are we muted? Okay, so sorry. Okay, so back to here. So we see before, David also vayishlach, v'yidrosh, so it's not exactly v'taged, but it's the same kind of thing. It's like information giving or taking. Vayomer, and he says something, these is all consecutive as well. Halozot Batsheva, is this not Batsheva, Eshet Uriah? So the bottom two lines here are the crux of the whole matter. The idea that she is a wife of someone, and now she's pregnant. So this parallel, I think, does a lot to tell us that therefore there is some agency for her as well, right? This kind of a bold thing to like write back to the king and say, hey, you have a problem now, king, because I am pregnant and you have to take responsibility for this. Not every woman would have done that, especially during that time. They would have said, okay, I'm pregnant, I'll deal with it, I'll be stoned, whatever will happen. But to send messengers to the king, I think that was a very big thing on her part. So now if we go back, I think we're reaching the end of our time, correct? What time are we? Oh, good. We'll have some time to chat. If we have, if we go back to the concept, part one, the conquest, we have the idea, the first conquest was Ammon and Rabbah of the people. And again, that was meant intentionally to contrast to David and what he was doing or not doing, what he should have been doing. Now, the second thing, we have the conquest of Batsheva by David, right? Obviously, that is the truth. But finally, there is one more conquest. And what would you say it was? Or could be? Anyone?
Leah and Yaakov?
No, within the story. But
the opposite, David by Batsheva.
Correct. There's the conquest of David by Batsheva if we believe this evidence coming up, these 4 things. If she was Me'al Hagag, if she was enticing him by hanging out on the roof as she was bathing, V'tavo elav, thank you, Aviva, thank you, Elaine, that she came to him. So as she was taken and brought to him, but as she was brought to him, she might have been the initiator, right? Ve'yishkav ima, right? So she was a willing participant in this. It was not ve'yishkav ota, right? She was very happy to have been there, it seemed. And then it says v'tishlach v'taged, that last little part we talked about, that she maybe had the plan from the beginning and sent messages to him saying that I am now pregnant. Okay.
Karyn, can I
Yes.
say something?
I'd love you to say something.
There can be a different possibility also, that it was meant to be, and it was like a dance of 2 people, right?
Beautiful. I love that idea. And I did come across that idea that I forget which Mafarish said it, but basically it was all a setup. Like God almost set it up so that this would happen. And I mean, again, I do believe there is agency, like God, people do have free will in that sense, but that is the tension, right? Is it was meant to be, or so it's a little bit of both. If you want to take down my email, you're welcome to email me privately with any questions or comments. In the meanwhile, I'm going to take off the screen share. And
Karyn, can I mention something?
Sure.
Okay, I think to my mind, it's important to recognize that they're both responsible, and we can't call her the aggressor. And he is, as a king, should have a higher mission and a higher standard. So to try to take him off the hook in any way, I think is most inappropriate. And also to me, that's similar to saying, oh, God wanted that. Oh, and now they're both off the hook. Because really, God wanted this all to happen. I find that there's something distasteful about that.
Right, and I agree. Like people, there is an idea in Judaism of reward and punishment. And if God were responsible completely for everything, then we wouldn't have the ideas of reward and punishment. So therefore, we do have to be responsible, and he is responsible. You'll see what happens in part 4, but nevertheless, and if I gave the impression that I thought Batsheva was completely like responsible for this, then please forgive me. That is not at all my intention. David should have been at war. David should not have taken her. All of these things, he was the initiator for sure. The question is, was she a willing participant? David is 100% culpable. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay.
And David is chastised for his actions.
Exactly. We will get there, and we will see exactly how that goes in part 4.
Right. But I'm just saying he wasn't let off scot-free for this.
Not at all.
Not at all.
In fact, that's exactly the same as what happens now when someone in a superior position entices or goes after someone subservient to them who might work in, let's say in a company. That person, is considered culpable, because even with Batsheva, like you want to resist the king, like really, like the same happens with women who are in subservient positions, and the boss makes moves on her. To me, it's similar.
Absolutely, but the only difference is, in the end, part 4, Batsheva is not, other than losing that one child, she does not seem to get any onish that we know of. It could be other things happen to her, but David does get punished for this. So therefore, you can say if it goes according to the punishment, then he was much more culpable than she was. My only contention is that she wasn't not culpable in any way, right? She was a willing participant, or she was somewhat of a willing participant, let's say. Okay, but I do hear your point about women in subservient positions. That is absolutely true. Okay, so if no one else has anything to say, you're welcome to email me or think of your questions for next week and submit them. And hopefully we'll move on with part 2 next week. And again, part 2 will be also a little bit short, so I'm sorry I won't go the full hour, but again, maybe that's a good thing, right? So we can have time to talk at the end. Have a lovely day, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karyn.